That's
crazy.
Yeah.
So
yeah. In Yogaville, the same thing happened in Yogaville at Satyananda's place here in the next county over. The ashram is wonderful. It's gorgeous, but there were sexual abuse allegations there as well. Yeah.
I don't know if there's a center that hasn't gone through that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Including the ARE, right?
Included, apparently, yes. I don't know what happened about that. We got all these reports at first, and I'm like, holy shit, maybe Atlantic University is going to go down, or something.
No.
And then we didn't hear any more about it. It's like went away.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many cases of that kind of thing. Muktananda, the same thing. And just, I don't know, there was a monk, when I was at Naropa, there was a monk, a Bhutanese monk who had come from Bhutan to study at Naropa, and he said that, you don't just, in terms of the transmission from the guru, you don't just get the light, you also get the shadow. And I thought that was very sort of astute, really, or insightful. It's explained a lot to me, because the whole Shambhala movement, at least the people I know in it, they're big drinkers, big partiers, and that's exactly how Chogyam Trungpa was, But the funny thing is that he also had something going on. He had some juice, spiritual juice. He was affected a lot of people, and started an international movement. And so it's like, I don't know what you do about, I don't know how you process that. Do you reject the whole thing because of these crises, or do you take what you like and leave the rest, kind of thing, or how do you work with it? It's not clear to me.
Right.
But,
there's good and bad, light and dark. I mean, we talked about that this week, right? And frankly, every one of these mystical aspects of the religions that we've looked at, they all say the same thing, that we're bathed in both light and dark every day. And I really think you have to realize that it's all around you, and that I'm susceptible to it. I have to deal with my shadows and my darkness, and I think you have to pick and choose. You can't cast everything away because you slip over into darkness. Otherwise, you'd throw yourself away, right? So that's
right.
Yeah, but I really grappled, and I would love your all's insight. Why did there have to be child abusers? Why does there have to be a form of darkness that harms the most vulnerable? The elderly, the disabled, children. Cruelty in any form is just a horrible thing. But I really grapple with the worst of the worst.
Yeah. Yes. What we love the most, what we inject the most love into, there's an opposite of that, right? There's an opposite of that. And the vessel is made, and it's obviously, we're all on board, and it is we ourselves that cause both the great light and both the great darkness amongst each individual. So
I just wish the spectrum of badness, I wish the spectrum didn't have to go so far for us to, appreciate the light, so to speak.
It goes pretty far.
It goes pretty far. Yes, it does.
So
Yeah.
what do you guys think about this? I mean, you know, this in theology, it's this, I suppose it's a classic, the problem of evil is there. And plenty of people think that, like, it's not just us, right? It's, in other words, there are forces of evil operating in the world. Plenty of people think that. That includes, obviously, both Christians, but and others. But in the new, you know, living in Sedona, the New Age community, same thing. I mean, there are forces of evil. Dark, they call them the dark forces. And I wonder what you guys think about that. Do you think there is such a thing as dark forces and evil? Do you think that that's a real thing, and that basically that we in this world can make ourselves sort of susceptible to those? Or is it just us screwing up? You know, I mean, because if you're a materialist, like a secular humanist or something like that, that's the only alternative you're left with, right? That's human. You know, this is an aspect of a natural aspect of human nature, and perhaps you could even think that you see those kind of forces in nature. I mean, out in nature, things eat each other, right? And survival is seemingly paramount. You know, what do you guys think? I wasn't intending to talk about this, but I just thought it just came up, and I just was curious. You know.
Oh, I'm so glad you are. Yeah. Scott, you've seen the worst. You've worked in the worst of it. How do you reflect back on it at this point? The worst. I mean, you've seen evil.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it exists. I mean, if you're not seeing it on the world stage today, then there is no such thing as evil. I mean, that in and of itself, I mean, indiscriminately killing women and children in hospitals, and if that's not evil, then I don't know how to define it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it, Dina, you hit it. There's like that continuum, and it, how far to the evil side do we let things go before we say, there's a line, you know? And I think that's where most of us fall in the middle of that. I'm trying to see my books over there, but it was a guy, a PhD named, I think it was Peck. You know who I'm talking about?
Scott Peck.
Scott Peck or something like that, where he defines evil. And
the road less traveled?
No, it's
no.
I have the book too. It's Beck, I believe it. No, Beck was
the guy who wrote The Road Less Traveled.
Yeah.
Oh, Peck, Scott Peck.
Scott Peck. Thank you. No, it's funny you bring that up, Robin. That was going to be my opening to my paper, was that poem, because I love that. For me, The Road Less Traveled is the mystic. I mean, but anyway, yeah, the M. Scott Peck, he defined, when I was doing my work on darkness and shadow and stuff like that, and he's got a fairly liberal interpretation of evil, that it's anything that takes the life. I mean, they say that, I've heard it before, that evil is live spelled backwards, or live spelled backwards. So anything that takes life from another person or endangers them in any way. And I mean, his interpretation, I mean, politicians, policemen, they can all be evil. I mean, if you're taking somebody's life force away from them, whatever it is, for your own benefit, then he defines that as somewhat evil. I think you could go that route, or you could go just the far end where we say, okay, no, what's going on today is absolutely evil. I don't, you know, anybody that thinks that it's not, you have to wonder about them. But yeah, it just seems like but my experience over the years was not people like we're seeing today, but the shadows coming out in everybody. You just see the darkness in everybody on their worst day. And sometimes we all cross the line. I think that goes without saying, but for your opening thing with that Buddhist stuff. And we're going through it with here with the guy leading my song. I mean, the right action and right speech says apparently he doesn't abide by it. But it drives me insane when I get it that we're all like that. But don't tell me sit up there and preach love and light and you're all this and not that. I mean, at least come out and say, hey, I've got both working inside of me. And yeah, I screw up just like everybody else. Then if you're not a hypocrite, we're all like that. It's just the hypocrisy that drives me insane.
I think that's incredibly well said, Scott. Doing a lot of research on on evil, and you go right back in the Book of Jubilees, in the Book of Enoch, on the Jewish and Christian side. Certainly, modern Judaism doesn't shy away from talking about, God creating evil, and it is wide open in the Bhagavad Gita. God says He created evil, and it is something that we do live with, and there is a spectrum of evil. I don't want to go too deep into it, but Peck's work was criticized by this gentleman right here, John Livingston, in a book called Adversaries Walk Amongst Us, and that's an incredible book. Livingston just passed away a short time ago, but I was trained by the Baldwin Group to do spirit release work, and I've done spirit release work for nearly 25 years, and there are lots of spirits that are on the dark side, and there is possession. And in Peck's book, he talks about attending, actual the expelling of spirits, and
this is
it's very shallow, right?
You use a Christian word. This is exorcism you're talking about.
This is exorcism, and it was a Catholic exorcism, and which is certainly functional. But I love what Saint Teresa says about this. Saint Teresa of Avila, when she talks about the evil that is all around them, and she says that we always are. Now she's talking about 15th century, 1500s, and she says, all I hear around me is the devil, the devil, the devil. When we should be saying Christ, 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 we should be looking at the light. For the devil's existence depends upon God, and with God's wink, the snap of His fingers, the devil is gone, right? The whole concept of evil is gone. And she says, in the end, she could face a whole gathering of dark angels and disperse them and drive them away because of her faith in Christ. But she says, I do not fear the devils as much as I fear those who believe in the devil.
Wow.
Which I really love. I've always loved Saint Teresa for her perspective on things. It's very clear in the Bhagavad Gita that God created evil, and He talks about why He created evil. In Jubilees, it gets even more plain, and in the Book of Enoch it does as well. In Jewish mysticism, they come right out and say that God created the worlds, and not all the worlds are physical worlds; they're spiritual worlds, but there are worlds that go to where God is, and then they go also backwards, and there are dark worlds, evil worlds. They use the word evil worlds. And the interesting thing about the mitzvot, or the commandments, that all Jewish people live in, when they comply to the commandments, when they do right action, they use that terminology, right action, then that right action creates a spirit, and it literally flows to the highest, to where God is. And when they do evil, it also goes backwards or downwards into the worlds of evil and strengthens evil. And so they are always challenged in this world of action, that the deeds that they do be good deeds, so that you build the positive or the light rather than feed the dark. It's interesting, huh? It's interesting.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
So let me ask you guys this question then. Does evil have a function? Does it have a function? In other words, is it somehow a necessity for there to be evil? The silence is deafening.
Yeah,
No, well, I don't want to keep talking.
I was going to say that you got to figure in the relativity of it as well, because, like what we may see as evil, another part of the world may not. I mean, it's just the way it's all perceived. But for me, if you don't have the negative or the darkness, you would never know what the light actually was. I mean,
Right.
if that makes any sense.
Well, do we not live in a world of polarity? I mean, for the most part, we live in a world of duality, where things seem to form pairs, opposites. And in fact, I think even the Tao Te Ching mentioned that. I mean, you've got the yin yang symbol, of course, which sort of expresses that, I suppose. So what does this make for, you have good, you have evil. Does evil then, is evil sort of an intrinsic necessity to this world we live in, do you think?
It seems to me like, and I've always been fascinated by, when we talked about symbols a few weeks back,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even think about it, but the yin yang symbol, I've always been fascinated with that. I can just look at it and it makes perfect sense to me that within each of us are those polarities, and at any given time I may be operating. I mean, when I was deep in addiction, the dark Scott was clearly coming out. I was, operating in that realm. But then there was days. Do what?
Come to the dark side, Luke.
Exactly. It truly is. And I found as weird as it sounds, I feel more at home in the darkness, at least in this incarnation, than I have in the light. The light, I mean, it's like I was a light shift guy forever. I mean, it's just the light is, for me, is I wouldn't say disturbing, but I feel more at home in the darkness, because I think within the darkness there's its own light to shine on it. But when I think people nowadays, the buzzword is ascension. I think the more and more that we shift in that yin and yang symbol towards the lighter side, the bigger that side becomes, and that's where ascension takes place. Or it could have just the opposite effect, which we may be seeing on the world stage right now, that if everybody continues to divide from one another, then that side of the symbol expands as the other one contracts, and then the dark energies take over. I'm not so sure about the the devil and all that concept, but for me it's just light and dark energies, and depending on which ones you subscribe to or exhibit or manifest. And I think that's what they talk about, going to what's the word I'm thinking of, when a certain amount get to that point, you know what I'm talking about, Robin, or anybody.
Yeah.
When enough people turn towards the light, then you'll have that
shift. Yeah.
It's a word that's just not coming to me right now.
It's like the 100th monkey syndrome.
Yes. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in fact,
Robin, what do you think about? Yeah, because I just don't know. But what do you think about? Do you think there are dark forces, or how do you view evil?
Well, it's interesting because I would say the truest answer I could give to that is that I simply don't know. You know, I'm not, but I know plenty of people who, so I don't have this ability to tune into. So it's interesting. We're talking about, Evan's talking about, dark entities or beings possessing people. I know there's plenty of people around, maybe you guys, I don't know, who can sort of tune into that realm. In other words, sort of perceive other realms where there are other entities, interacting with our own realms. I don't have that capability. So I don't see any sort of direct evidence of these realms of other beings or whatnot. But so I've always tended to be not detail oriented. So it's like I'm really bad with detail. I really like big picture stuff. And there's a chapter in Ken Wilber called The Way, on Ken Wilber's books, the big one, Sex Ecology and Spirituality. It's called The Way Up is the Way Down. And this comes from a lot of different traditions, but in particular, sort of a component of Hindu philosophy is that there's downward forces and there's upward forces, right? And it's the downward force that actually causes creation. So, I mean, from the Brahman, from the highest or whatever, it's a kind of a descent into this world. And then the world starts to ascend back through, so that's called involution. And this one's called evolution. Going back up is called evolution. So, but evolution takes work. And they call it tapas. It's like you have to generate a kind of spiritual energy through your own work in order to sort of hook into the upward flow. It's not something that just kind of happens naturally. It takes consciousness, it takes effort and whatnot. But the downward one seems to just kind of happen by itself, this kind of thing. It's like takes you all the way basically into materiality. And then there's the force upwards. That kind of thing I can get on board with. You see what I mean? That I sort of see that. I guess one of the questions is, can I see it in myself? Can I see the downward force? Can I see the upward force? And the answer is yes. I can see both of those forces. So, and the downward force is like, it's pretty easy to sort of fall into the downward force, because our world, even our culture, kind of makes that easy. It seems to me. But what it doesn't make easy is to get on board with evolution. So the journey back up to the one kind of thing. It doesn't, our culture, doesn't seem to make that easy. And hence, the four of us here talking, is in essence a part of the, I think, a part of the upward force, but we're connecting in a way in order to be part of that upward force, and seems to me, and Atlantic University has that. I don't think it thinks of itself that way, but I kind of do think of it that way. That it's part of, it's a contributor of bringing people together who are interested in getting on board with evolution, essentially, in the positive sense. Yeah.
It's interesting that you talk about the aspect of falling. In probably one of the most blunt and clear discussions about falling is in the Book of Enoch. And in the Book of Enoch, it talks about how the angels actually fall. Those angels, be in Noah's time, who fell and caused the need for the Great Flood in Christian and Jewish lore. They literally fell, and they fell from less density, where vibrations are fast and quick and things are more ethereal. And it talks about how the angels simply fell into density, right? And as they fall through the layers of ethereal existence into slower vibrations, then they develop the physical aspects of what we live with every day, our physical body. So there is an actual story about falling into density.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think, the analogy of gravity is perhaps a good one. I don't know. So, because it's easy to fall, it's easy to fall, but it's not easy to fly. It's not easy to go against it. Like
That's right.
Escape velocity, getting off the earth or whatever, that takes a lot of energy, a lot of work. Whereas falling just seems to be the natural course of things, kind of thing. But I don't know if that addresses this issue of evil or not. I guess I just sort of, in my mind, I sort of think of whatever it is that each of us do to evolve ourselves, spiritually and otherwise, that there's kind of, you could think of it as beings sort of hanging onto your ankles, trying to sort of exerting a force that way, you're against that, and I see as true. But and in fact, I was going to ask you guys, though, so while I don't have the ability to perceive these other realms, so it's like between us and, say, God, many traditions have, there's sort of realms which are populated by different kinds of beings. It's like there's an ecology of spiritual beings, between us and God. And that I don't know what to think about that. I'll have to comment on it, but I'm very open-minded about it, that exists. But on the other hand, so we're studying, this last week we've been doing Taoism, which is, in a way, a kind of, in terms of philosophical Taoism at least, it's kind of a godless religion. I mean, in a sense, we have the Tao, but the Tao is this impersonal thing, right? Rather like the Greek word cosmos. It represents a kind of order, physical order, but also order on other planes too. But it's not a personified God. See, it's not a personal God. It's an impersonal perspective, and I don't think, for me personally, that I could. For me, spirituality is incredibly personal. So I'm not into like getting impersonal about being spiritual. You see what I mean? Like, so if like, which one could easily do in sort of traditions like Zen, it's just like, sit and face the wall, and it's the sense is this one of increasing detachment and getting away from the personal, getting detaching from the personal, letting go of the self, the idea of self, all that stuff. And I've never been able to do that one. Really. I mean, I've tried. So, but the thing is, if I'm so into this idea that this spirituality is very personal, like for me, I'd have to make the Tao personal. In order to relate to the Tao, it would have to become personal to me. And then I would be creating kind of a God. You see what I mean? So then why wouldn't evil also be personal? If you see what I mean? Why wouldn't? If I hadn't thought about this, but if I'm willing to think that if I'm turning things into gods, then surely I would be able to turn things into devils. You see what I mean? I don't know.
Well, I think we do that, don't we? I think that's very obvious. If you even take the most extreme that I can think of, and that's the way of the Tao. It in verse 1, it talks about, if you're talking about, just this universal nameless creature, you can call it origin, right? But then the second verse talks about, if you name it, it's the mother. So it gives you the opportunity, if you wish, to call God the mother of all things. That's exactly what it says. I think we personify it. Evan, I do that. I love the aspect that the Tao gives you the opportunity to call this great mechanism of production, right? That gobbles things up and spews things forth, but you get to call it mother because now you can relate to it, right? So in every look at Brahma, to try to explain Brahma, but you can explain Krishna, you can explain Vishnu, you can explain the personifications of God. And the Christians do the same thing with Jesus, right? We are able to personify with Jesus, and when we can't, if the religion you belong to doesn't want you to get that close to God, well, then you use Mary, and you can pray to Mary. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women. Blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and in the hour of our death. It's beautiful. It allows you to pierce this gigantic, incomprehensible God, Ein Sof, right? That can create with a breath. In fact, not the breath, the last little, and all of a sudden creation comes into existence. I can relate to Hail Mary, full of grace, but can I relate to Ein Sof? So every religion gives you that opportunity. Every religion, every mystical aspect of it gives you that opportunity to grab, to reach through and find something that is like a talisman, and you can hold on to it and you can perceive it with our human eyes.
What do you guys think about this personal aspect versus?
Robin, I may be reading into it wrong, but clarify for me for my own edification. When you say, to me, personalize and personify, are two different things. I have difficulty personifying a universal energy, but it's very personal to me.
Okay. Yeah, I don't, let's say this, I relate to it as I might to a person, to another being, if you see what I mean. That's what I call making it personal. So I don't have a particular personification in my mind, like Mary or something like that, that I tend to work with, or Jesus, or, but I do, is rather like the Mode and Ni practice that we did. There's you relating to a you. I'm very I thou, I guess, in my spirituality. I feel like it's always I thou. So there's a thou essentially, and but I don't. The thou for me is a very deep mystery. So I don't want to sort of concretize the Tao personally. This is just naturally, it's not intellectual. I just tend to shy away from making it into a concrete entity. I relate to the Tao as a kind of sort of the ultimate mystery, I suppose. But it's a mystery that has characteristics. Ultimately, Einstein supposedly said, the most important decision you could ever make is whether you live in a friendly universe, benevolent universe. That he characterized that as a decision. You see what I mean? So that I live in a friendly, is it like a total shit show out there and it's like, and that's it, or is it ultimately the good, for the good? That believing that seems to be pretty intrinsic and will affect, I think, an individual's life considerably, whether you think it's chaos, essentially, the universe is chaos, or whether you think there's an order that is for the good, but we don't know how to define the good, but it's intrinsically there's a good to the universe, kind of thing. And so I have chosen to think that there is. You see what I mean? But ultimately, despite the fact that there's evil,
Mm-hmm.
but even evil ultimately ends up working for the good. If you see what I mean, in a very weird way. So that it's like it's beyond my capacity to understand or to grasp, but so in a way it's paradoxical and whatnot, it doesn't make sense. But ultimately there's something about this universe that I want to be a part of, if you see what I mean, and that I want to assist in some way. I want to help it, this aspect of the universe. You see what I mean? I want to be a contributor to, if we call it evolution, then we call it evolution. But I can't defend any of those thoughts. I can't really defend them. This is just what I sort of think, what I've sort of come to in terms of, living. So for me, it is. I know that it's possible that the ultimate truth is a non-dual one and it's all one, but I haven't. I'm not actually that interested in it. I'm not interested in the non-dual particularly. My sense of oneness is sort of filtered. I mean, it's rather like being part of a family rather than being the same as. So in other words, it's this I thou thing sort of persists because I perceive that the relationship, the universe functions via relationship. And there is no universe without relationship. Everything is in relationship with something else, and in incredible sort of complexity. So if you go to the extreme non-dual, then it's just like, what does that mean? It's like everything's in relationship with itself, kind of thing. But for me, that doesn't. It's not a visceral experience. It's an intellectual. It's conceptual, and I'm happy to stick with I thou. You see what I mean? For me, there's another. There's always another, and to relate to, and it's the more it gets increasingly personal. To me, the closer you get to God, the more painfully personal it gets, and to the point where you can't even stand it. That's my experience. So it's not impersonal. It's not about being impersonal at all. Me. So that's a whole other sort of direction. The effort to be the witness, and just the witness. Well, I've spent decades trying to be the witness, being the witness, but that is good. It's a good practice, but I don't think for me, it's not the be all and end all at all. To just be the witness. That's all. I'm involved. I'm here to be involved. Yeah. So.
I think I'm kind of riding the wave on the other side of what you're saying.
Okay.
You're the one that brought it up, and you're the one that brought me over to the thinking of the non-dualism within dualism, or vice versa, dualism within non-dualism. I go with the route of the Casey thought, I am of the great I am. I connect, and I think that's where the Tao and the Jewish mysticism, I got chills doing that exercise. This other stuff, and I think it has to do with the more you made me think about it, the group think. I can't do the group think thing, where people tell me what I should think. It doesn't resonate with me. I have to connect with it on an individual level, but I can't personify a universal energy, but I can connect to it. I feel at one with it. And I think the word I was thinking of earlier was critical mass. When we all get to that level of an energy flow where we can take that positive to a higher level, decreasing the negative, then the critical mass, I think we're all going to ascend to a different level of consciousness. And for me, I think we can connect with that. And for me, the dualism is having to go through somebody else. And I just don't think that just doesn't work with me. I think we can all connect with that. But obviously there's dualism because, and for me, the shit show is here on Earth. It's not in the cosmos. For me, that's the orderly thing. We're the ones that turn it into a shit show, either on the negative or the positive side, through the evil or the light.
Well, let me ask you this question. I don't know if I've asked you. I forget what I've asked you guys. But this thing about, I know we have mentioned it, but it's like, so if we create the shit show, were we not designed to create the shit show? In other words, do you think that we have that amount of independent power that we can really screw this whole thing up? That we in other words, we're doing something that we weren't intended to do. If you see what I mean, we weren't even designed to do. Through sort of creation. So this goes to the sort of unnatural versus unnatural thing. It's like, I see humans as we think of ourselves as being unnatural, that we do things that are unnatural. And I keep asking this question, is that possible? Is that even possible for me to do something that's unnatural? Because nature made me. I didn't make me. Nature made me. So I do what nature made me to do, it seems like. You know, and you know, I guess it gets into the whole issue of free will and stuff like that, but I don't want to really go there. But it seems to me that we are shit show creators.
And I think that's what we're designed to realize, is that we are shit show co-creators, or we could go the other way. It's most people don't want to realize that this shit show is of our own manifestation.
Yes.
They want to believe that somebody else, we are the populace of irresponsibility. I mean, we don't take any responsibility for our own actions. We want to blame, it's God did this, or God made me be able to do this.
The devil made me do it.
Right? The
right?
devil made me do it. If we are co-creating, then we're designed to understand the fact that we're all part of this co-creating process, and we're all universally connected. But those of us that don't want to go to that level to say that, you know, it's like, it drives me nuts when people are praying for a basketball team to win on Friday night. You know, it's like, are you kidding me? We create it, and I think we are able to, at certain point when we reach that critical mass, to understand that we are co-creators of this universal energy that we call, whatever it is you want to call it, God or whatever. Then it's like, it's akin to self-mutilation. Hurting one another is akin to self-mutilation.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Terrific.
Mm-hmm.
You're really, I love what you're saying, Scott. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Truly. Love it. Nice job. Brilliant.
Well, I guess I'll go back to what you started with, which was I think, what did you call it? The non-dual in the dual, or something. Yeah.
You called it. I just read.
This is your fault, Robin.
Yeah. I was a non-dualism guy until you brought me over to the other side.
Well, there is this, you know, I mean, and I can see this as being true in an ultimate sort of perspective, kind of thing. Like this idea of the holographic universe. Have you guys come across that?
I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So, you know, one of the characteristics of a hologram is that the whole is contained in each of the parts. And there's a German poet and scientist called Wolfgang Goethe, who has influenced many people, including me. So there's a distinction in the world between, so the way we work is what he calls unity and multiplicity. So in other words, we create a unity from the multiplicity. Like outside my window, there's pine trees, right? And so that's a pine tree, that's a pine tree, that's a pine tree. They're all different from one another, they're all unique. But I create abstractly the category of pine tree. You see what I mean? So from the multiplicity, abstractly, I create the idea of unity, right? So that's unity and multiplicity. But he said that the truth is actually the opposite. The truth is multiplicity in unity. In other words, the whole is present in every instance. You see, but that is a perception. You can turn it into an intellectual thought, but it makes no sense until you have the perception that in one pine tree are all pine trees. You see what I mean? And so for me, the world, that is a characteristic of the world, is a perception that I've had, that the world is basically a multiplicity and unity. So in other words, in a sense, we're part of a multiplicity and unity. There is a oneness, but that one is contained in every instance. You see what I mean? And with the right kind of glasses on, the right perception, the right consciousness, you see that, you get that the whole is present in the one.
What was this dude's name?
Goethe is, he's Wolfgang Goethe, Goethe. He's famous for the Faust.
And he said, "Be careful not to become the monster." What was that famous?
No, that was
quotation? Who was that? I thought that was Goethe. Be careful that you don't become the monster you what?
Yeah, I quote him in my book. What's his name? That's Nietzsche.
Oh, right. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I love that. That's one of my favorite quotes.
What is it exactly? Yeah. What's the quote?
It's though is something, and I used it in my book. It talks about those who chase monsters must be careful not to become one.
Yeah.
Because they'll fall into the abyss, and that's the dark. I mean, Nietzsche. You want to talk about a dark dude? That guy was. He made me look like light.
You are light, Scott.
Well, Goethe influenced a whole not so well-known strand of philosophical thinking. Maybe you might even call it spiritual thinking, but it goes through Rudolf Steiner, who's a big student of Goethe, very big. And then Steiner in turn influenced many others, including Coleridge, the British poet, and this group of people called the Inklings, which included C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, a guy called Owen Barfield in Britain. Their thinking was influenced by, so you can tie the thread back to Goethe, essentially, with these people. And they're almost impossible to understand, but they're very, very interesting. It's a very interesting thread of philosophy. And Steiner is a fascinating character. I mean, talk about access to other worlds. I mean, he was all kinds of crap, and in touch with the Akashic fields, or whatever. And, I mean, that's just way out. But I love reading about it. It's like,
oh yeah,
yeah. But I don't, have any personal experience for it. But he called it, spiritual science. That seemed appropriate terminology for what he saw we needed to become spiritual scientists. And though what he means by that would require a lot of explication, I think. And then the Inklings are really interesting. Obviously, they're Christian, but they had this fascinating perspective sometimes. Yeah. So, Scott, why don't you say a little bit more about the road less traveled?
So that was going to be my opening to my paper. It just when I pulled that up. Where is it? Somewhere around here. I don't know what I did with it. Anyway, I've always been fascinated. I used to have that poem hanging on my wall, and it talks. He talks about coming to a fork in the woods or whatever, and the one is worn down, and obviously it looks like the one most people have taken. So he takes the one less traveled, which is the one that proves to be, I forget what the statement is, but proves to be more interesting. But the more research I did on it, it was kind of a comical text. Everybody takes it in a deep meaning sense, which is the way I've always taken it. But he had this buddy, what's his name? I can't even think of his name right now. The poet.
I don't know. Let me check.
Oh, here it is. Never mind. I got it. I had to pull it up. Robert Frost. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Robert Frost, yes.
He used to go walking with a friend, and he wrote this poem because they would always go out and the guy could never make a decision on which way he wanted to go. So this was his take on that, and he sent it to his buddy, and he didn't seem to see the humor in it. But people, I mean, I didn't know that, but it's basically it's the how, and what fascinates me is how the decision on which path you take or which decision you make, how it takes you down a different road. And for me, the mystics, it just rang true to me. The mystics take that path that it's not the group think path. It's the I want to do it on my own kind of that individualism path. And it's more rewarding and more fruitful than going the group think path, which is the worn down one. And for me, that was the essence of the poem, is that we have the choice to make. And do you go the way that everybody else does, or do you try and find the path on your own?
Why do you think that the way that everyone else goes is less desirable? I mean, why couldn't the way that everyone else goes be the way to go? Why should it be the road less traveled?
It just, for me, that resonate. I mean, I've always been one of those guys that takes the hardest way possible to get to another point.
So, just because.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a reason. But I just don't, especially in today's world, it's either you're either one of us or you're the evil other. And if you don't think the way we do, then we don't like you and we unfriend you. And it just doesn't make sense to me that we should just kind of all be who we are and let the chips fall where they may. But for me, I would much rather take the path less traveled and see what becomes of it.
Talk about the benefits. I mean, tell us what you've experienced, because presumably you've been treading the road less traveled. Like,
I don't know that.
What has been the reward of that? What has been the benefit of that?
I mean, the road less traveled for me was the path of the darkness, I guess. It was just seeing all the stuff that I saw, and it brought me to become stronger. And I guess it goes back to the light and the dark that you were talking about earlier, that if I hadn't seen all that, I don't know that I would be here studying what I'm studying today. I mean, it's just, I always found a home, like I've tried to say, in the darkness. And that for me is the road less traveled. People want to try and go the way of the light. And when they step off the path, they rein themselves in and they're not living there. The road less traveled, or the one that's more traveled for me, is the one that other people think I should take, whether it's my parents or my friends or my church. It's, you need to fall in line with us and go this way. And if that's your way and that's who you are, then that's fine. I get that. But if you're doing it just for the sake of being who somebody wants you to be, and that's the road more taken, then I disagree. Then I think we should all be on the road less taken and be who we are. To me, it all comes back to the true self. I think people take the easy way as opposed to the vulnerable way.
How about you, Dina? Have you been treading the road less traveled?
Yeah, and I think it's for the same reason Scott is. I have to learn things the hard way, evidently. But I totally agree with him that the well-traveled road is really who other people think you should be and what other people think you should do, versus you have to live it and experience it and learn it. And some of us have to learn it harder ways than others. How about you and Evan?
Well, wait, you just think, wait, it's like, so your explanation of taking the road less traveled is that, again, it sounds somewhat similar to Scott's reasoning, which is that that's just the way I'm made. I have to do things, the word expression you said is the hard way. I have to do things the hard way, which we're equating with the road less traveled. And you're just saying, it just so happens that I have to do things that way. Is that true? It's just who I am. It's like, it's just a fortunate or unfortunate thing about the way you're made, that you have to do things the hard way, or that Scott has to take the road less traveled.
Maybe it's a spectrum. Maybe the road less traveled, it represents everybody's path to the true self, that where there will be difficulties. It just feels like for based on free will and the choices that we choose to make or not make, that path can be more or less difficult, maybe. And so based on very, very poor discernment, that road less traveled to the truer self, I've made it much more difficult than maybe it is for others.
Okay. And Evan, road less traveled? You definitely be treading the road less traveled.
This is a fascinating conversation, by the way. The road less traveled has meant many different things for me over the years, and as I looked at it as a young man or a young boy, it meant one thing. As I've gone through my spiritual journey in life, it's changed. To me, the road less traveled today means that it's the path that I have chosen. I think it's very important that we all find our authentic path, and the road that's well traveled simply means to me that that's other people's road. I have to find my path, my true path.
There's an assumption here, isn't there, though, that the authentic path is a unique one? Is there not?
I didn't really hear you.
The authentic path is a unique one.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It's unique to yourself, and I think you find it, you fall off it, you find it, you fall off it all through your life, and you have to be incredibly aware and awake in order to continuously find it. This last week with the Tao, I mean, think about what the Tao is, and it even uses the path, the word path in its name, in its construction, in its basic proposition to the world, to human beings. So I have to say that it's very important that we find our authentic path and we follow it. This falls into the question you asked me, Robin, that I have not answered you yet, but I've thought a lot about it. Robin asked me to. I said that I believe that our souls, when we come to this earth journey, our souls know and understand the mission that we have, if you will, through this incarnation. And Robin said, "Well, how do you know that?" And I think that's what we're talking about right now. Is that it takes a great deal of effort on our part, and a great deal of asking, a great deal of following the synchronicities and the signs that we stumble across in our lives, in order to find our path. and I truly believe that it's a little bit different for every single one of us. We have our own journey, and Scott's is Scott's. I've known you now for a number of years, Scott, and I've loved walking your path with you, and you know, each post I read, regardless of the class, there's a little bit more that I understand about Scott's path. It's it's very unique. I love the Hindu perspective that there are many ways, many paths to God, and many for each individual there's a specific path. We did posts a few weeks ago where we all talked about that a little bit, where how far will God go to meet your efforts to find Him? How far will God go? And Krishna Das talks about that in his journey, how God is reaching for you all the time, and has prepared synchronicities for you and signs that as you march along as best you can to on your path to God, that God is always reaching out to help you, right? He's all.
Well, I love this. I love this thing that, and hence, I guess behind that is the idea that you know, if you're trying to find your authentic path, that is equivalent to reaching out to God. You see what I mean? And what you've just been saying.
It is for me.
Yeah.
It is for me. Yes.
Right. So that and then let's call it then the path of the mystic, perhaps. I don't know if that's true or not. The path of the mystic is a unique one, always.
Always.
So that's like a law of nature. We just made a law of nature. Path of the mystic.
I don't want to make any laws, and I truly don't believe in laws. But yeah, you know, the idea that there is a truth, you're always searching for truth. That truth changes with every synchronicity, right? So these hard words that we use, I try to.
Yes, absolutely. But the authentic path, I mean, the path of the mystic is a unique one. We are in this course where we're supposed to be taking I have said up front that we're taking a mystical perspective as much as possible on all of these traditions. And while the mystics do occur within traditions, you can see when you read about them that their path has been a unique one. Their path to whatever realization they've had has been a unique one.
They tear through. They tear through the dogma, looking for the spirit of things. Right? We you know, religion can be a wonderful thing. It can be an actual block to our progress if we don't find the spirit of things. Christ talked about that. You know, there is the law and there's the spirit of the law. Well, what is the law supposed to be doing? It's supposed to be guiding us to reach through to obtain our direct association with the ultimate spirit.
But we seem to have this odd sort of within religions. We seem to have this odd dichotomy, I guess you'd call it. I mean, the followers predominantly of the formal or orthodox religion are not following a unique path. In other words, by definition, they are following a collective path. Right? And then within that same tradition, you have these mystics who have somehow popped out of this group, and they're following a unique path. I mean, would that be an accurate description for you guys of the situation?
For me, I think so.
Yeah. And so, but what characterizes a mystic is the search for their own. So they're not content with a passed on truth. They have to have a direct experience or direct experiences of truth. Right? They're not satisfied with hearing about something or whatever, or believing something. They have to experience something. Would that be accurate? And somehow that puts them on this unique path. That puts them into a path that's unique. But amongst all of that uniqueness, could we not say that there is a thread that is the same? Right? So that the mystical path, one could recognize it in each tradition. A mystic in one tradition would recognize a mystic from another tradition, and so forth. And that we, these students of AU, could sort of see that there's even though each path is unique, there's a commonality. Could we say that to the mystical path itself? So it's the road less traveled, and there's something about the road less traveled that is kind of always the same.
I think the experience, the direct experience, becomes very much you find the similarities in the direct experiences. Would that be what you're trying to say, Robin?
I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Oh, great. Yeah. Thanks.
I'm just following where my perverse mind goes, I guess. So I think what I'm trying to sort of make this connection back almost to this idea of multiplicity and unity. The pine trees, if you see what I mean.
Yes,
each one is unique, right? Yet there is within each one, there is the whole. You see what I mean? So this is multiplicity and unity. This is uniqueness in unity. You see, uniqueness and wholeness. You see what I mean? So that there's a kind of necessity for the path to wholeness. There's a kind of necessity of uniqueness, if you see what I mean. I don't know if that makes sense. But so what I'm trying to do, I think, is in this course, we've been on this journey through unique traditions. They're distinct from one another. And yet all of you, I can predict with 90% certainty, maybe 85% certainty, will tell me at the end that there's a unity here.
Isn't it like, if you look at the poems of Rabia, and you look at the poems of Rumi, and I think almost all of us have used a portion of a poem or a poem in our posts. And what is it that we find within the words of these mystical poets that make us go, oh, we're finding connection. We're finding unity with that specific poet through those words which speak to us, and that pulls us together, and we find that same feeling of oneness, that same feeling of connection is probably better, that same feeling of connection that the poet is hoping that we do, that the poet is talking about and the poet is felt. So yeah, I think there is a oneness, and there is the connections on our path that feel so good at times are those things that may be slightly different, but there is that connection that we all feel.
We know it when we see it.
Yeah. And when we feel it, right? When we feel it.
See.
So much of this is hard.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So even though you're walking in the road less traveled, as you must be, it seems to me, to be at Atlantic University, that you have the company of everyone else who's walking the road less traveled, right? And everyone who in history who's walked the road less traveled. You know, you have
that for me is the dualism within the non-dualistic, is what both of you are describing. To me, that's the essence of what I've been trying to say. It's like the pine tree, you know, there's the one in all of them, but each one's a little different on a little different trajectory.
Yeah.
But
that's okay.
But they're all pine trees. I mean, that they share something in common. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that makes me wonder, like throwing this idea out, that makes me wonder if, you know, I struggled with a justification for this course. So I mean, justification. How on earth can you justify a race, frantic race through the world's great wisdom traditions or religions or whatever? How can you justify that? And this is how I justify it, essentially, is that it may give us chance to see the multiplicity and unity, if you see what I mean. So in other words, it's like, what is it that's true about all religions, all wisdom traditions? What is it that really underlies them all? And it's from an analytic, intellectual point of view, it's really hard to, I would say almost impossible to extract that. You could be an academic who would argue for one side of the equation or the other side of the equation, which is what I hate about rational arguments. But if you sort of experience it, even if it's just these sort of tastes, then something is communicated that is sort of beyond the rational, which is this multiplicity and unity. There's something about being human that we're learning here. You see what I mean? In this journey through all these religions, it's like, yeah, you could be a Muslim, or you could be a Taoist, or you could be a this or a that. Does that make you different from each other? Yes and no. So yes and no. And so there's could there not become an appreciation of the diversity? You see what I mean? I mean, we obviously are believers in uniqueness and authenticity. And so that we look around and what do we see? We see, just even me looking out the window, it's uniqueness, it's authenticity. but existing within a kind of oneness. If you see what I mean. And so one could love multiplicity. One could love it because it's a demonstration of this thing that we are ourselves trying to do. See what I mean? But which, paradoxically enough, connects us to the whole. Only in being unique, only in being authentic, can we actually become a part of the whole, a part of God, or whatever you see. Is this making any sense?
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and that's why the Bible, the Tower of Babel, which was touted as a punishment, that at one point in time we were all one culture, one language, and it was a punishment that we were diversified, is actually a gift, right?
Well, possibly, and that story, I had to go back and read it when you mentioned it, and I'm like, whoa, that's a fascinating story. It's like there must be some like sort of deeper implication or meaning to that story. I didn't sort of doubt. But another thing that fascinated me was that same essential myth occurs in many traditions. You can find that myth in South America.
Ah, wow.
And it's almost identical. I tell you, it's like practically word for word. I mean, you just, change a few of the words and you've got the South American version, the Mayan version, or it's just like, that story is all over the bloody place. And it's like,
wow.
what the hell is that about?
Just like the floods, the floods the same way, right?
Yeah, it's like, okay, that makes me, then now that makes my ears prick up. That means there's some significance here that you're delving into, which I think is interesting. We have to make a decision. There's only 2 weeks left of the course.
Wow, yeah.
So this coming week is indigenous spirituality. I don't personally think that the chapter in Houston Smith's book, which he calls the primal religions, I think, the primal traditions, I don't think it's as good personally as other. I mean, it's got good bits in it, but as other sections of his book, it's the weakest. I think it's the weakest section. But anyway, there's all kinds of supplementary material on it, and so we're going into that, and then the last week is going to be. I'm trying to cram a whole lot of stuff into last week, which is, talking about the New Age essentially. But where does the New Age draw its roots from? It really comes from this what we call Western esotericism, this Western esoteric tradition that is kind of like a shadow tradition that has existed in Europe, I suppose, mostly, but in America, but probably all the way back, really. The Western esotericism is a really interesting kind of offshoot that you couldn't really call a religion, but it's a set of beliefs, a set of experiences. It tends to express itself in groups that have initiations and levels and are somewhat secret. You rise and are exposed to increasingly deep levels of revelation in these groups. It involves, alchemy in medieval Europe, and hermeticism, all these other kinds of words. But that has the weird sort of subset of beliefs coming from that, which is a very interesting sort of force within our history. it's come out into this very popular expression of the New Age, which and I find it's all fascinating. And you can't really call the New Age a religion or a tradition, but if you live in Sedona, like you should, you have to. So, but anyway, so those are the 2 weeks. But the question the question I wanted to ask you guys is, do you want to do another dialogue before the end of this course? So if we're doing it every 2 weeks, if we did it, in 2 weeks' time, it would be on the last weekend of the course. Do you guys want to do that? Or
well, I'd love to wrap. I'd love to have one that Sunday after, because the papers due Saturday, right?
Probably, yeah.
Of that last week. If you guys would like to have one that Sunday after the whole course, I think that'd be awesome.
That'd be perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what we'll do. That then we'll do the 2 weeks. 2 weeks today, same time. We'll try and do the last dialogue. So that sounds good.
The last dialogue.
It's very ominous. Are we going to solve the world's problems? What are we going to do?
Good luck.
I expect nothing less.
Thanks, guys.
All right. You guys.
Right.
Have a good one.
It was great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.